If you're planning on visiting Ecuador, you might want to hear this first.
La tarea estratégica es mantener el embalse de Masar para poder tener control sobre el sistema energético nacional. Como ustedes saben, ayer el embalse llegó a 2.114 metros. Cuando llega a 2.110 metros, perdemos el control del mismo y a partir de ese momento dependemos exclusivamente de lo que llueva. Entonces yo no le puedo adelantar algo que solamente Dios sabe.
Yeah, the situation in Ecuador has drastically changed. And you know it's bad if an energy minister is saying that we're dealing with something that only God knows. So in this video, I'm going to quickly explain why Ecuador currently has an energy crisis and why you don't want to visit Ecuador right now. And at the end of the video, I'll give you the only real reasons you should visit Ecuador right now. Because believe it or not, there are some. Now, to understand why Ecuador currently has an energy crisis, let's take a look at an article in Primicias. According to this article, there are 6 reasons for Ecuador's energy crisis. The first reason is that many hydroelectric plants were built, but then the investment was slowed down. Between 2007 and 2017, in the government of Rafael Correa, 14 hydroelectric power plants were built. With these plants, the country was able to drive away blackouts to the point that there was plenty of electricity and Ecuador was even able to export energy to Colombia. But then there was a fiscal crisis and public investment went down. Between 2020 and 2023, 10 power generation plants were to come into operation to meet a growing demand for electricity. But only 2 went into operation. Then, to promote hydroelectric projects, in 2020, the Villonaco 3 wind power plants and the El Aromo wind power plants were awarded to private investment, but construction has not yet begun. This leads us to our second reason, which is that electricity demand is growing. While the installation of new power plants slowed down, electricity consumption skyrocketed. The demand for electricity closed at 25,724 gigawatts per hour in 2023. That is an increase of 7% over the previous year. In 2021 and 2022, electricity consumption grew at 4% per year. All of that led to an increase in the electricity deficit. In 2023, the deficit was 465 megawatts, and by 2024, it was already at 1,080 megawatts. Then we have the third reason, which is obsolete and maintenance-free thermoelectric parks. Although their cost is high because they use fuel, thermoelectric plants offer permanent energy. But in Ecuador, more than a third of the thermoelectric plants are between 30 and 52 years old, which causes them to be constantly repaired or unavailable. This is why in 2022, for example, of the 1,796 thermoelectric megawatts that Ecuador has, 628 megawatts were unavailable. That is 13% of the country's supply. And then we have the fourth reason, which you might have heard of already, which is a longer and more severe drought. This period of low rain that impacts the operation of hydroelectric plants is increasingly severe. Proof of this is that they are getting longer and drier. According to the government, the country is experiencing the worst drought in 61 years. Then we move on to the fifth reason, which is that there was an investment in hydroelectric plants, but they don't work at 100% capacity. The fact that not all hydroelectric plants are operating at 100% is not only the fault of the drought. There are hydroelectric plants that were built during the government of Rafael Correa that have failures or that were never inaugurated. Coca-Cola Sinclair's generation units, for example, are in permanent or constant repair due to factory failures. In addition, the plant, which is the largest in Ecuador with 1,500 megawatts, also goes out of operation when the sediments of Coca River, mud, and other materials that can damage the turbines rise. And other plants such as Toachi Pilatón Complex or Quijos have not been able to go into operation due to failures in the construction of civil works. Both have been under construction for almost 13 years. And then the sixth reason that the article states is that Ecuador depends on the Mazar Reservoir and it is insufficient. The Mazar Reservoir guarantees electricity for 45 days to Ecuador if there is no rain, but the demand for electricity grew and this reservoir fell short, leaving the country exposed to blackouts. And although Mazar is large, it does not compare with reservoirs from other countries, such as Itaipu in Brazil, which give a 6-month electricity guarantee to the South American giant. The electricity crisis with massive and scheduled power cuts shows that Ecuador's water reservoirs have already fallen short to cope with the severe drought that hits the country, aggravated by climate change. Now, I do have my own thoughts as to why Ecuador has this energy crisis, but these are the assumptions that I have as a person, an Ecuadorian, who's been living here for over 10 years. So definitely take them with a grain of salt. So my first thought or reason why Ecuador is in this energy crisis is the situation we had with sabotage earlier in the year. If you don't remember or didn't know, earlier in the year, the ex-Minister of Energy, Andrea Robo, tried to sabotage the Consulta Popular, which was happening during that time frame, and that's why we had power outages earlier in the year. And while you might think that that's irrelevant because that happened earlier in the year, I think that it's important because I think everything that's happened throughout time, as we heard from the article in Primicias, can affect us right now. And you also never know that there might be another person trying to sabotage things as well. And the second thought that comes to mind is that investments are definitely going somewhere else. We already know that there was a VAT or IVA increase that is being used in order to guarantee more safety in the country. And in that same way, there are probably funds that are being used for something else. My only hope is that now that the situation has become more critical, that more funds are allocated towards this energy crisis. And my last reason is corruption, because of course it's corruption, because there's always corruption. If so much money hadn't been stolen throughout the years, I think we would have a lot more funds to use in order to combat this whole energy crisis, and even the safety crisis that Ecuador is also going through. But yeah, here we are, undergoing a very much avoidable energy crisis. So why wouldn't you want to visit Ecuador right now? Well, I think with everything I explained, it's quite obvious why you wouldn't want to be here at this moment. First of all, obviously, there are moments throughout the day where there is no power. Think about it this way. If you live in a place that currently has power 24 hours a day and you decide to take a vacation to Ecuador, why would you want to come here knowing that you would have 9 hours to 11 hours and in some cases even 14 hours without power? As someone who's currently living through that situation, I definitely don't see why you would want to come and pretty much put yourself in an uncomfortable position of not having power for such prolonged periods of time. And of course, the final reason why you wouldn't want to come is because there are now increased safety concerns due to the power outages. Just to give you an idea of how bad it was going to be, there was actually, at the beginning of when we were starting to have the rationing, there was going to be a period of where it was going to be no power nationwide all night from around 12 until 6 in the morning. People were panicking because could you imagine how pitch black it would be and how easy it would be for criminals to take advantage of such a situation? Now, of course, the government had a come to Jesus moment where they realized that that was a terrible idea. But it's still not good if there are hours throughout the day where you have to exercise increased caution because you never know if someone might want to take advantage of the fact that there is no power in a specific sector or area. But this of course leads to why you would want to visit Ecuador. Now for this first reason, I'm going to huff on some seriously high levels of copium and say that you could of course take advantage of the time, the hours, where there is power, and enjoy the things that there are to enjoy here in Ecuador during those times.
Then of course there's also the possibility that the energy crisis could end as soon as tomorrow, since, according to the energy minister,
Entonces yo no le puedo adelantar algo que solamente Dios sabe.
but definitely subscribe for updates, since this is a situation that's constantly evolving.
You could also say that it's not so bad if you already live in a country that has blackouts, and maybe you're already used to this. So coming to a country where things are cheaper and you could have a good time, not necessarily with electricity, then that could be a reason for you to come as well, maybe. And then a better reason than the ones I just gave is if you're coming to Ecuador and you plan on visiting Galapagos Islands, I think you'll be just fine. According to a friend who lives in Galapagos, they're apparently not undergoing the same kind of energy crisis that we're undergoing over here in mainland Ecuador. Not only that, but even if Galapagos were undergoing some kind of energy crisis, I think that if you're planning on going to visit Galapagos, you're not going to enjoy electrical things over there. You're probably going to check out the wildlife and explore Galapagos as an island. So basically, if you're planning on visiting Galapagos, then everything will be just fine. But in that same way, if you plan on visiting mainland Ecuador, then I think you might have to really reconsider coming to Ecuador. And it's unfortunate for me to have to say this because that also means that I have to rescind what I said a month ago in my Should You Visit Ecuador video. But in that video, I had talked more about the situation with crime and how that was going to affect the idea of coming to Ecuador. So if you still want to visit mainland Ecuador, then you should definitely check out that video next. And if not, don't worry, I completely understand. There is no need to rush visiting Ecuador at this moment. As my good buddy Don always says, this too shall pass. Make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel. Leave a comment with your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching, and as always, Ace out.